At my family's monthly dinner, my sister Emma pointed her fork at me and sneered, "How does it feel being the most useless one here?" The entire table erupted in laughter. My parents, my brother Jake, even my teenage niece Madison, everyone except me. I had been quietly supporting this family for 3 years, paying their mortgages, car payments, and credit card bills, while they mocked my dead-end accounting job. I smiled calmly and asked, "How does it feel knowing this useless one won't be paying your bills anymore?" The room went silent. The silence stretched across Mom's dining room like a heavy blanket. Emma's fork clattered against her plate as her hand began to shake. I reached into my purse and pulled out my phone, watching their faces change as I scrolled through my banking app. "Let me share some numbers with you," I said, my voice steady despite the rage building in my chest. Emma's mortgage payment, $2,400 monthly. I've covered it for 18 months straight. That's $43,200. Emma's face went from flush to pale gray. Jake shifted uncomfortably in his chair, suddenly very interested in his mashed potatoes. Jake's BMW lease and insurance, $850 monthly for 2 years. That's $20,400. I swiped to another screen. Dad's specialist appointments and medications after the insurance company denied coverage, $15,600 over 8 months. Dad's jaw dropped. He stared at me with confusion and disbelief. Mom's credit card payments to Nordstrom, Macy's, and that jewelry store downtown, averaging $1,200 monthly for 3 years, $36,000 total. Mom clutched her pearls, the ones I had unknowingly purchased through her credit card payments, and whispered, "Sherry, honey, we had no idea it was so much." "Oh, but we're just getting started." I pulled up my savings account statement. The emergency fund I depleted when Emma's husband, Derek, thought she was making big money from her consulting business. The $12,000 I gave her to invest in what I later learned were casino trips to Atlantic City. Emma's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as she stood abruptly. "Sherry, you can't just—" "Sit down," I commanded, and something in my tone made her comply immediately. "Derek thinks you earned enough from clients to buy that new Lexus in the driveway. Should I tell him the down payment came from my Christmas bonus?" The color drained entirely from Emma's face. Madison, who had been smirking moments earlier, now stared wide-eyed at her mother. "And Jake?" I turned to my brother, whose confidence had evaporated. "How's Sarah going to feel when she discovers that your successful consulting firm hasn't paid a single bill in 6 months, that I've been covering your mortgage, your kids' private school tuition, and even your country club membership?" Jake's hands trembled as he reached for his water glass. "Sarah doesn't need to know about the lies, about the fact that your business exists only on paper, about how you convinced 3 neighbors to invest their retirement savings in your non-existent company." The revelation hit the table like a physical blow. Dad leaned back in his chair, his face ashen. Mom's hand flew to her mouth. $78,420. I announced, holding up my phone screen. "That's what this useless daughter and sister has given to this family in 3 years. While you've mocked my steady job, my small apartment, my second-hand car, and my simple clothes." Emma began crying, but they weren't tears of remorse. They were tears of panic. "Sherry, please don't do this. Derek can't find out about the gambling. He'll leave me. He'll take the kids." "Maybe he should," I replied coldly. "Maybe he deserves to know that his wife has been living a complete lie." The room fell silent except for Emma's quiet sobbing. Madison stared at her mother with a mixture of shock and disgust. Jake fumbled with his napkin, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Effective immediately. I continued, "Every automatic transfer stops. Every credit card I've been paying off is your responsibility. Every loan, every mortgage payment, every insurance premium, it's all yours now." Dad finally found his voice. "Sweetheart, surely we can work something out. Family is family." "You're absolutely right, Dad. Family is family. But family doesn't humiliate each other for sport. Family doesn't take advantage of each other's kindness. And family certainly doesn't lie about where their money comes from." I stood up and gathered my purse. I'll give you exactly 72 hours to figure out how you're going to manage your finances without me. After that, you're on your own. As I walked toward the door, Emma's voice cracked behind me. Sherry, wait, please, I can explain everything. I paused at the threshold and turned back one final time. The time for explanations was 3 years ago, Emma. The time for honesty was before you decided I was the family failure. The time for respect was before tonight. The door closed behind me with a soft click, but I could hear the chaos erupting inside, raised voices, accusations, and the sound of someone pounding their fist on the table. For the first time in years, I walked to my car with my shoulders straight and my head held high. My phone started ringing before I even reached my apartment. Emma's number flashed across the screen, repeatedly followed by Jake's, then Mom's, then Dad's. I let them all go to voicemail and poured myself a glass of wine, settling into my comfortable armchair to listen to the increasingly frantic messages. Emma's first voicemail was angry. Sherry, you can't just abandon your family like this. Call me back right now. By her fourth message, desperation had crept in. Please, Sherry, I'm begging you. Derek is asking questions about the credit card statements. I told him I'd explain everything tomorrow, but I need your help figuring out what to say. Jake's messages followed a similar trajectory, starting with indignation and quickly dissolving into panic. Sarah's been planning a trip to Europe with money she thinks we have. How am I supposed to tell her we're broke? Sherry, please call me back. We need to talk about this like adults. But it was Mom's final message that made my chest tighten. Honey, I know we hurt your feelings tonight, but you have to understand we never meant to take advantage. We thought you were happy to help. Your father had another episode after you left. His blood pressure spiked and I had to call the paramedics. He's okay, but Sherry, this stress isn't good for any of us. I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. The guilt trip was exactly what I'd expected, but knowing my father's health was genuinely fragile made everything more complicated. The next morning brought a parade of visitors to my apartment. Emma arrived first, looking like she hadn't slept. Her usually perfect hair was pulled into a messy bun, and she wore sweatpants and an oversized t-shirt, a far cry from her typical designer outfits. Sherry, thank God you're home, she said, pushing past me into my living room. We need to talk. Actually, we don't. I remained standing while she collapsed onto my couch. I said what needed to be said last night. But you don't understand the whole situation. Emma's voice cracked as fresh tears spilled down her cheeks. I'm 3 months behind on the mortgage. The bank sent a foreclosure notice 2 weeks ago. If I don't come up with $7,200 by next Friday, Derek and I will lose the house. I felt a flicker of the old instinct to help, but I pushed it down. Then I suggest you find $7,200. From where? Emma's voice rose to near hysteria. My consulting business barely exists. I've been lying about the clients, about the income, about everything I spend most of my days at the casino, because I can't face the reality that I'm a complete failure. This admission hung in the air between us. I had suspected Emma's gambling problem, but hearing her confess to the extent of her lies was still shocking. What about Derek's income? He's a successful attorney. Emma laughed bitterly. Derek thinks we're doing so well financially that he reduced his caseload to spend more time with the kids. He's been turning down clients because he believes I'm bringing in enough money to support us. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Outside your building, need 5 minutes, please. I walked to my window and looked down to see my brother pacing on the sidewalk, still in his pajamas and a winter coat. Emma followed my gaze and groaned. He's been calling me all night, too. Sarah found some paperwork. When Jake knocked, I reluctantly let him in. He looked even worse than Emma, unshaven, wild-eyed, and clearly on the verge of a breakdown. Sherry, I'm in serious trouble, he said without preamble. Sarah went through my desk last night after you left. She found the business incorporation papers, the fake client contracts, everything. Fake client contracts. I stared at him in disbelief. Jake, what exactly have you been doing? I created a consulting company on paper to make Sarah think I was earning money. I forged contracts with fake businesses to show her we had clients. When she asked about payments, I told her they came through electronic transfers that she wouldn't see on our regular statements. Emma and I exchanged glances. Even she looked appalled. Sarah thinks we have $120,000 in business income sitting in a commercial account, Jake continued. She's already put a deposit down on that European trip, $15,000 charged to her credit card. She's planning to pay it off with money that doesn't exist. This gets worse every minute, I muttered. There's more. Jake's voice dropped to a whisper. Some of our neighbors heard about my successful business and asked if they could invest. I took money from 3 families, $60,000 total. They think they're going to get returns on their investment. The room went completely silent. Emma stared at Jake with her mouth open. You committed fraud, I said slowly. Multiple counts of fraud. I was going to pay them back when my real business took off, Jake protested. I just needed time to build actual clients. With what skills? I snapped. You have a degree in communications and no business experience. What made you think you could suddenly become a successful consultant? Before Jake could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was Mom. Sherry, sweetheart, thank goodness you answered. Can you please come to the hospital? Your father wants to see you. My heart sank. What happened now? He had chest pains around 3 in the morning. The doctors think it's stress-related, but they want to run more tests. He keeps saying he needs to talk to you about something important. I looked at Emma and Jake, both staring at me with desperate hope in their eyes. I'll be there in 30 minutes, I told Mom, then hung up. We're coming with you, Emma said, standing up. No, you're not. I grabbed my keys and headed for the door. You two need to figure out how you're going to clean up your own messes. I'm done being your safety net. As I drove to the hospital, I couldn't shake the image of my father's face when I'd revealed the extent of my financial support. He had looked genuinely shocked, which meant either he was the best actor in the family or he really had been oblivious to how much I'd been giving. The truth I was about to discover was far more complicated than I had imagined. Dad was sitting up in his hospital bed when I arrived, connected to monitors but looking more alert than I'd expected. Mom hovered nearby, clutching a cup of coffee with shaking hands. Sherry, honey, thank you for coming. Dad's voice was weak but sincere. I need you to know something important. I pulled a chair close to his bedside. Dad, you should rest. The doctors said, no, this can't wait. He reached for my hand with fingers that felt cold and frail. I had no idea about the money. Your mother and I, we thought the kids were finally getting their lives together. We thought Emma's business was thriving and Jake was building something real. Mom nodded emphatically. We would never have let you carry such a burden if we'd known, sweetheart, never. But you did know I was helping with some bills, I pointed out gently. You knew I paid for Dad's medical expenses. We thought it was just temporary assistance, Mom said, tears streaming down her face. A few $100s here and there until the insurance issues got sorted out. We had no idea it was thousands. Dad squeezed my hand. Emma told us her consulting business was so successful that she wanted to help us out. She said she was paying the mortgage herself and just needed a family member's name on the bank transfers for tax purposes. My stomach dropped. She used my name on fake transfers. The bank statements showed payments from S. Mitchell Consulting. Dad confirmed. We thought you had partnered with Emma in her business. The level of deception was staggering. Emma hadn't just lied about her income, she'd created an elaborate fiction that made our parents believe I was succeeding alongside her. And Jake told us he was doing so well that he wanted to pay for his kids' private school as a way of honoring your grandmother's memory, Mom added. He said Grandma Ruth always believed education was the most important investment. I felt sick. Every dollar I'd given them had been wrapped in lies that made me look like either a willing participant or a beneficiary of their supposed success. A knock on the door interrupted my thoughts. A nurse peered in and said, Mrs. Mitchell, there are 2 people here who say they're your daughter's siblings. Should I let them up? Before I could respond, Emma and Jake appeared in the doorway. Emma had changed clothes and fixed her hair, clearly attempting to present a more composed image. Jake had shaved and wore a business casual outfit that made him look like he was heading to a job interview. "How is he?" Emma asked, rushing to Dad's other side. "Stable," I replied coolly. "We were just discussing some interesting revelations about bank transfers and fake consulting companies." Emma's face went pale again, but she tried to maintain her composure. "Dad, you shouldn't stress yourself with business talk right now." Emma Marie Patterson. Dad's voice carried a strength I hadn't heard in months. "Sit down, both of you." Emma and Jake reluctantly took seats near the window. The small hospital room suddenly felt suffocating with all of us crammed inside. "I want the truth," Dad continued. "All of it. No more lies, no more stories, no more excuses. Sherry has been supporting this family while we praised you two for your success. I want to know exactly how this happened and exactly what you plan to do about it." Emma broke first, dissolving into sobs that shook her entire body. Between gasps, she managed to confess to her gambling addiction, her lies to Derek, and the foreclosure notice. She admitted to using my name on fake business documents and to stealing money from joint family accounts to cover her casino losses. Jake's confession was even more damaging. He revealed the full scope of his investment fraud, naming the 3 neighborhood families who had trusted him with their retirement savings. He admitted that his business had never had a single legitimate client and that he'd been using investor money to make payments to earlier investors, a classic Ponzi scheme structure. Mom listened in horror, occasionally gasping or covering her mouth. Dad's monitors beeped faster as his stress levels rose, but he insisted on hearing everything. When they finished, the room fell silent except for the medical equipment and Emma's continued crying. "I have conditions," I announced finally. Everyone turned to look at me. "If you want any possibility of my help in the future, and I mean any possibility, you will meet the following requirements. First, both of you will make public apologies to everyone you've lied to. Emma, you'll tell Derek the complete truth about your gambling and our family's finances. Jake, you'll confess to your investors, and to Sarah about the fraud." "Sherry, please," Emma started. "I'm not finished." My voice cut through her protest. "Second, you'll both enter professional counseling. Emma, you'll go to Gamblers Anonymous and get treatment for your addiction. Jake, you'll get legal counsel about how to handle the fraud charges you're likely facing." Jake's face went white. "Fraud charges? Did you think stealing $60,000 from neighbors would go unnoticed forever?" I asked. "Third, you'll both get real jobs, not fake businesses, not schemes, not get-rich-quick plans. Real employment with real paychecks. And fourth," I continued, "you'll sign legal documents acknowledging the money I've given you as loans, not gifts. You'll commit to repayment plans even if it takes decades." Emma wiped her eyes and looked at me with something resembling hope. "If we do all that, you'll help us through this crisis. I'll consider limited emergency assistance to prevent homelessness or legal prosecution, but the days of unlimited financial support are over forever." Before anyone could respond, the door opened and Derek walked in, looking confused and worried. "Emma, what's going on? You've been gone since 6 this morning, and when I called your office, they said you haven't been in for 2 weeks. Emma's face crumpled as she realized her worlds were colliding. Derek's presence meant the truth could no longer be contained or managed. "Derek," she whispered, "we need to talk." But Derek's attention had shifted to the room's occupants and the tension that was palpable. His lawyer's instincts kicked in as he noticed Emma's tears, Jake's guilty expression, and the way everyone seemed to be waiting for something terrible to happen. "Emma, what's really going on here?" His voice carried the authority he used in courtrooms. "And why does everyone look like they're attending a funeral?" I looked at Emma and said quietly, "This is your first test. Tell him the truth, all of it, right now." The moment of reckoning had arrived and there was no escape for anyone in that hospital room. Derek's presence transformed everything. Emma looked around the room desperately as if searching for an escape route that didn't exist. Jake stared at his hands, knowing that his own reckoning would come soon enough. Derek. Emma began, her voice barely above a whisper. I need to tell you something about our finances. What about our finances? Derek moved closer to her chair, his lawyer's instincts clearly sensing something serious. We don't have any money. The words tumbled out of Emma in a rush. My consulting business never existed. The mortgage payments, the car payments, the private school tuition Sherry has been paying for everything. Derek turned to look at me, then back at Emma, confusion written across his face. What do you mean the business never existed? I've seen your client meetings, your contracts, your income statements. They were all fake. Emma's voice broke completely. I've been going to the casino instead of client meetings. The contracts were forgeries. The income statements were lies. Derek sank into the remaining chair as if his legs had given out. Emma, are you telling me that for 2 years I've been believing our family's financial security was based on a complete fabrication? Yes, she could barely get the word out. And the house, our savings, the kids' college funds. Gone, all gone. We owe $7,200 by Friday or we lose the house. Derek stood up abruptly and walked to the window, staring out at the parking lot. When he turned back, his face was a mask of controlled fury. How much gambling debt are we talking about, Emma? Emma glanced at me, then at our parents before answering. About $40,000 total. $40,000. Derek repeated the number as if testing how it felt in his mouth. And how long has my sister-in-law been subsidizing our mortgage while I reduced my caseload because I thought my wife was a successful entrepreneur? The silence stretched until Dad spoke up weakly from his hospital bed. Derek, we had no idea either. The children deceived all of us. Derek's attorney training kicked in as he began asking pointed questions. How many bank accounts did Emma have access to? Had she forged his signature on any documents? Were there other creditors he didn't know about? With each question, Emma's situation looked worse. She admitted to opening credit cards in both their names, to borrowing against their life insurance policies, and to taking cash advances that she'd gambled away. I need to protect my children, Derek said finally. Emma, I want you out of the house tonight. I'm filing for separation tomorrow morning. Derek, please. You've lied to me about literally everything for 2 years. You've put our family at financial risk. You've committed fraud using my name. His voice was deadly calm. I'm a family law attorney, Emma. I know exactly how this goes from here. Before Emma could respond, my phone buzzed with a text from Sarah, Jake's wife. Is Jake with you? Found some disturbing paperwork in his office. Need to talk to him immediately. I showed Jake the message and he closed his eyes in defeat. Sarah's going to find out about everything too, he said quietly. She was planning to surprise me with divorce papers anyway. She hired a private investigator last month because she suspected I was having an affair. Were you? Mom asked, her voice barely audible. No, but that would have been simpler than the truth. Derek was making phone calls now, speaking in low, urgent tones about asset protection and emergency custody arrangements. Emma sat frozen in her chair, watching her marriage dissolve in real time. Emma, I said gently, you need to leave with Derek and tell the kids what's happening before they hear it from someone else. She nodded numbly and stood up. Derek ended his call and looked at her with a mixture of sadness and disgust. You have 1 hour to pack some clothes and explain to Madison and Tyler why Mommy won't be living at home anymore. His voice softened slightly when he mentioned the children. And Emma, if you ever want a chance at shared custody, you'll get into treatment immediately and stay there until you're genuinely better. After Derek and Emma left, Jake's phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen and Jake answered with trembling hands. Jake, where are you? Sarah's voice was loud enough for all of us to hear. I'm sitting in our kitchen with police officers who want to discuss your business investments. Apparently, the Henderson family filed a complaint about fraud. Jake looked at me with pure terror. Sarah, I can explain. No explanations, Jake. Just get home now. The officers want to speak with you about $60,000 in missing retirement funds. The call ended and Jake stood up slowly. "This is it," he said quietly. "My marriage, my freedom, probably my kids, everything's over." "Maybe," I replied, "but for the first time in years you'll be dealing with the truth instead of lies. That has to count for something." As Jake left to face the police and his wife, I turned back to our parents. Dad had been listening to everything with growing comprehension, and Mom looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past hour. "Sherry," Dad said weakly, "I'm sorry. We failed as parents. We raised children who became liars and thieves." "You raised children who made terrible choices," I corrected, "but it's not too late for them to make better ones." Mom reached for my hand. "What happens now?" I looked around the sterile hospital room, thinking about Derek's shocked face, Jake's inevitable arrest, and Emma's complete breakdown. "Now they face the consequences," I said simply, "and maybe if they're very lucky and work very hard, they'll find a way to rebuild their lives on something real instead of lies." Outside the window, storm clouds were gathering over the city. The reckoning had only just begun. 3 days after the hospital confrontation, I was sitting in my apartment going through 3 years of bank statements when I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Hidden among the routine transfers and payments were dozens of transactions I had never authorized. My hands shook as I called my bank's fraud department. "I need to report unauthorized transactions on my account." I told the representative, my voice steadier than I felt. "Can you identify the specific transactions, ma'am?" I read off the dates and amounts while cross-referencing them with my personal records. $15,000 in charges. I had never made luxury hotel stays in Las Vegas designer purchases from stores I'd never visited. Cash withdrawals from ATMs in Atlantic City during weekends when Emma claimed to be visiting clients. "It appears these transactions were made with a card bearing your name, but a different signature," the fraud specialist explained after reviewing my account. "We'll need to file a police report for identity theft and credit card fraud." What if the person who made these charges is a family member? Ma'am, fraud is fraud regardless of the relationship. If someone used your credit without authorization, that's a felony. I hung up and immediately called Derek, knowing he needed to understand the legal implications of what Emma had done. "Sherry, thank God you called," Derek answered. "Emma's been staying at a motel since I kicked her out, and she's been calling me nonstop, begging for another chance." "Derek, I found something you need to know about. Emma has been using my credit cards without permission. We're talking about $15,000 in fraudulent charges." Silence stretched across the phone line before Derek responded in his professional attorney voice. "Sherry, are you planning to press charges?" "I don't want to, but I may not have a choice. The bank is requiring a police report." "Jesus Christ." Derek's composure cracked. "Emma, what have you done?" I could hear him pacing in the background. "There's more, Derek. I found receipts in her handwriting for cash advances she took against my credit cards. She's been doing this for months." "I'm coming over," Derek said, "and I'm bringing the receipts and bank statements from our joint accounts. I think Emma's crimes go deeper than either of us realized." When Derek arrived an hour later, he looked like he hadn't slept since our hospital meeting. He spread financial documents across my kitchen table with the methodical precision of someone building a legal case. "Look at this," he said, pointing to a bank statement from their joint checking account. "Emma deposited cash totaling $8,700 over the past 6 months. When I asked her where it came from, she said it was consulting fees paid in cash." I compared the deposit dates to my credit card statements. The correlation was unmistakable. Every cash deposit Emma made coincided with cash advances she'd taken from my cards. She was stealing from me to make it look like she was earning money, I realized aloud. Derek, she was using my credit to maintain the illusion of her business success. Derek rubbed his temples. The private investigator I hired to follow her, I thought she was having an affair, but now I understand what he was really documenting. He pulled out a folder filled with photographs and surveillance reports. The images showed Emma at various casinos, not with another man, but alone at slot machines and poker tables. Timestamps indicated she was gambling during hours when she claimed to be in client meetings. "She lost our kids' college funds gambling," Derek said quietly. "But what she lost was actually your money that she'd stolen and deposited into our accounts." My phone buzzed with a call from Detective Martinez from the Police Financial Crimes Unit. I put him on speaker so Derek could hear. "Ms. Mitchell, I've reviewed your fraud report and the bank's documentation. The evidence suggests systematic financial abuse by someone with access to your personal information. Do you have any idea who might have had such access?" Derek gestured for me to continue. "Detective, it was my sister, Emma Patterson." "I see. Ma'am, I have to inform you that what you're describing constitutes multiple felonies: identity theft, credit card fraud, and financial exploitation. The amount involved pushes this into serious criminal territory." "What kind of penalties are we discussing?" Derek asked, identifying himself as Emma's husband and an attorney. "For $15,000 in fraudulent charges, we're looking at potential prison time. 2 to 5 years depending on her prior record and whether she cooperates with the investigation." Derek closed his eyes. "Detective Mrs. Patterson has 2 minor children. Is there any way to handle this without criminal charges?" "That's up to Ms. Mitchell, but I have to warn you the bank and credit card companies may pursue their own criminal complaints regardless of the family's wishes. Financial institutions take fraud very seriously." After I hung up, Derek and I sat in silence staring at the evidence spread across my table. "Emma's going to prison," Derek said finally. "Even if you don't press charges, the financial institutions will. And when they do, I'll have no choice but to file for full custody of Madison and Tyler." "How are the kids handling this?" Derek's face crumpled slightly. "Madison understands more than Tyler does. She keeps asking when Mommy is coming home, and I keep having to explain that Mommy is sick and needs to get better. But Madison—" He paused, struggling with his words. "Madison is angry, really angry. She overheard me on the phone with the bank and figured out that Emma stole from you." "What did she say?" "She said she was ashamed to be Emma's daughter. She asked if she could change her last name to mine." Derek wiped his eyes. "Sherry, these kids are going to need therapy to get through this. How do you explain to children that their mother is a criminal?" Before I could answer, my phone rang again. This time it was Jake. "Sherry, I need your help." His voice was panicked. "Sarah hired a forensic accountant, and they found discrepancies in our books that I didn't even know about." "What kind of discrepancies?" "Remember the money you gave me for the kids' school tuition? I never actually paid the school. I used it to pay earlier investors in my fake business. The school has been sending notices about unpaid tuition for months, but I was intercepting the mail." Derek leaned forward, listening intently. "Jake, are you saying the kids aren't even enrolled anymore?" "They've been attending on grace period status, but the school is threatening to expel them next week unless we pay $14,000 in back tuition." Derek grabbed the phone. "Jake, this is Derek. Are you telling us that you committed tuition fraud on top of everything else?" "Derek, what are you doing there?" "Learning that our family's criminal behavior is even more extensive than we thought." Derek's attorney persona was in full control now. "Jake, you need to get legal representation immediately. You're not just looking at fraud charges anymore. You're looking at conspiracy theft and possibly money laundering if you moved stolen funds through multiple accounts." "Money laundering." Jake's voice cracked. "Derek, I was just trying to keep my family afloat." "By stealing from your neighbors, lying to your wife, and using your sister's money to pay for crimes she didn't know you were committing." Derek's voice was cold. "Jake, you need to understand something. When the investigation into Emma's fraud expands, they're going to examine every financial transaction involving this family. Your fake business, your investor fraud, your tuition scam, it's all going to come out." "What should I do?" Derek looked at me before answering. "You should pray that Sherry's willingness to forgive extends to testifying as a character witness instead of as a victim of fraud. Because right now, you and Emma are facing federal charges that could destroy what's left of this family." As Derek finished the call, I realized that my simple decision to stop enabling my family had unleashed a cascade of consequences that none of us had anticipated. The truth wasn't just setting them free, it was threatening to destroy them entirely. The next morning, I woke up to 17 missed calls and a text from Mom that simply read, "FBI at the house. Come now." I threw on clothes and drove to my parents' house, my mind racing with possibilities. When I pulled into the driveway, I saw 2 black sedans parked on the street and several people in windbreakers with FBI printed on the back walking in and out of the front door. Mom met me at the door, wringing her hands and looking terrified. "They have a warrant," she whispered. "They're taking boxes of papers from Jake's old room and Emma's files from when she used to do her business work here." Agent Rebecca Chen introduced herself as the lead investigator on a case involving investment fraud and money laundering. She was professional but firm as she explained that Jake's activities had caught federal attention. "Ms. Mitchell, we understand you've been financially supporting family members who are engaged in fraudulent business practices. We need to interview you to determine the extent of your knowledge about their activities." "I had no knowledge," I said immediately. "I thought I was helping my brother with a legitimate consulting business." "We believe you," Agent Chen said, "but your financial records show you transferred significant amounts of money to accounts that were used to pay fake returns to defrauded investors. That makes you potentially an unwitting participant in a Ponzi scheme." My stomach dropped. What does that mean? "It means we need to examine every transaction you made to ensure you weren't knowingly helping to perpetrate fraud. It also means you may need to testify as a witness in federal court." Agent Chen led me to the kitchen table while other agents continued searching the house. "Tell me about your brother's business," she said, opening a recorder app on her tablet. I explained everything I knew about Jake's supposed consulting firm, including the fake contracts he'd shown Sarah and the investor meetings he claimed to attend. Agent Chen took notes while occasionally asking for clarification. "Ms. Mitchell, we've traced money from your accounts to payments made to 3 families in this neighborhood, the Hendersons, the Moores, and the Castellis. These families invested their retirement savings based on your brother's promises of high returns. Did you know your money was being used to make fraudulent payments to these victims?" "Absolutely not." The reality of Jake's crimes was becoming clearer with each question. I thought I was helping with his mortgage and business expenses. "Your brother operated what we call a family-funded Ponzi scheme. He used your legitimate financial support to make payments to early investors, which gave his fake business credibility. When new investors came on board, he used their money to pay the earlier ones while skimming funds for personal expenses." Agent Chen showed me a chart detailing the money flow. My contributions had been essential to keeping Jake's scheme operational. Without my financial support, his fake business would have collapsed within months. "The total amount defrauded from investors is $63,000, Agent Chen continued. "But the scheme was designed to grow much larger. We found documents suggesting your brother planned to recruit investors throughout the county." Mom sat down heavily at the table. "Agent Chen, what kind of punishment is Jake facing?" "Federal fraud charges typically carry sentences of 10 to 20 years, depending on the amount involved and the defendant's cooperation. Your son is also looking at potential racketeering charges if we can prove his activities were part of a broader criminal enterprise." "Criminal enterprise." I stared at her. "Jake's not part of organized crime." "Ma'am, running a Ponzi scheme is organized crime. It requires planning, coordination, and systematic deception. The fact that he involved family members and used your financial support to legitimize his operation actually makes the charges more serious, not less." Before I could process this fully, another agent entered the kitchen carrying a box of documents. "Agent Chen, we found something interesting in the daughter's old room." Agent Chen opened the box and pulled out bank statements, credit card receipts, and what looked like business records. These belonged to Emma Patterson, Ms. Mitchell's sister. She spread the documents across the table, and I immediately recognized Emma's handwriting on several papers. But what shocked me were documents I'd never seen before in corporation papers for something called Patterson Family Enterprises, listing both Emma and Jake as officers. "Did you know your siblings had formed a business partnership?" Agent Chen asked. "No," I whispered, staring at the paperwork. "I had no idea." According to these documents, Emma Patterson was supposed to recruit high-net-worth individuals for investment in your brother's consulting firm. She was working as his sales representative, targeting wealthy families at country clubs and charity events. Mom gasped. "Emma has been attending charity fundraisers for months. She said it was for networking for her consulting business." "It was networking," Agent Chen confirmed grimly, "but not for legitimate consulting. She was identifying potential victims for her brother's investment fraud. We believe she was planning to target dozens of families before the scheme collapsed." My phone rang, interrupting the interview. Sarah's name appeared on the screen, and Agent Chen nodded for me to answer. "Sherry, thank God you picked up," Sarah sobbed. "The FBI is at my house, too. They're arresting Jake." I could hear commotion in the background, men's voices, children crying, and what sounded like someone reading Miranda rights. "Sarah, where are the kids?" "They're with my mother. Sherry, the agent, said Jake could go to federal prison for 20 years. 20 years, Tyler will be an adult by the time his father gets out." Agent Chen gently took the phone from me. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Agent Chen with the FBI. I need you to remain calm and cooperate with the agents at your location. Your husband's attorney should be present for any questioning." When she hung up, Agent Chen turned back to me. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm going to be direct with you. Your family was operating a criminal enterprise that defrauded multiple victims. Your financial support made their crimes possible, even though you were unaware of their true activities." "What does that mean for me?" "It means you're a victim too, but you're also a material witness. You'll need to testify about every payment you made and every conversation you had about your siblings' business activities. The defense will likely argue that you were a knowing participant, so you'll need your own attorney to protect your interests." As I sat in my childhood kitchen surrounded by FBI agents and evidence of my family's crimes, I realized that my decision to stop enabling Emma and Jake had accidentally exposed a federal criminal conspiracy. The useless sister who had been mocked for her stable accounting job was now the key witness in a case that could send her siblings to federal prison. The irony wasn't lost on me, but the gravity of the situation made it impossible to find any satisfaction in being vindicated. That evening, after the FBI had finished searching my parents' house and arrested Jake, Dad suffered another heart episode. This time, the chest pains were accompanied by difficulty breathing and severe anxiety. Mom called 911 in panic, and I met them at the emergency room. "It's the stress," Dr. Williams explained as Dad was hooked up to monitors in the cardiac unit. "His blood pressure is dangerously high and his heart rhythm is irregular. We need to keep him for observation, but I'm more concerned about the psychological factors causing these symptoms." Dad looked frail and exhausted in the hospital bed, a stark contrast to the strong man who had raised us. "Sherry," he whispered when Mom stepped out to call my Aunt Carol, "I need you to know something about Emma's gambling." "Dad, you should rest." "No, this is important." He struggled to sit up slightly. "Emma didn't start gambling recently. It began years ago after her divorce from her first husband. Your mother and we enabled it back then too. This was news to me. Emma had been married briefly in her early 20s, but the family rarely discussed her first husband, Marcus." "What do you mean you enabled it?" "When Emma and Marcus divorced, she was devastated. She started going to the casino as a way to get out of the house. At first, it seemed harmless. She'd win a few $100s and come home excited about her luck." Dad paused to catch his breath before continuing. "Then she started losing. Big amounts. She came to us crying, saying she'd made a mistake and borrowed against her credit cards. We paid them off, thinking it was a one-time problem." "How much did you give her?" "Over 2 years, about $25,000. We drained our savings account and borrowed against this house." Dad's voice was filled with shame. "When she married Derek and seemed to get her life together, we thought the gambling was behind us." I felt a chill of recognition. Dad, when did Emma's gambling problem restart? About 3 years ago, right around the time Derek thought her consulting business began taking off. 3 years ago was exactly when I had started providing financial support to the family. Emma had used my money to fund her gambling addiction while maintaining the facade of business success to Derek and our parents. Does Derek know about Emma's first gambling problem? We never told him. Emma begged us to keep it secret, said it would ruin their marriage if Derek knew she'd had financial problems before. Dr. Williams returned with test results and a grave expression. "Mr. Mitchell, I'm going to be direct with you. Your heart is under severe stress and we need to address the underlying causes. The anxiety and trauma your family is experiencing could trigger a major cardiac event." "What are you recommending?" I asked. "Family therapy, stress management, and possibly medication for anxiety. But most importantly, Mr. Mitchell needs a stable, low-stress environment to recover. The ongoing legal situation with your siblings is literally threatening his life." As if summoned by the doctor's words, Mom burst through the door in tears. "Sherry, it's Emma. She's in the emergency room at General Hospital." "What happened?" Derek called. He found her in her motel room unconscious. There was an empty bottle of sleeping pills and a note. The room spun around me. "A suicide attempt." "Derek thinks so." He said the note was addressed to Madison and Tyler, apologizing for being a terrible mother. Dr. Williams stepped forward. "Mrs. Mitchell, I understand this is a family crisis, but I need to emphasize that Mr. Mitchell cannot handle additional trauma right now. His heart simply cannot take more stress." I looked at Dad, who had turned even paler at the news about Emma. His monitors showed his heart rate spiking dangerously. "Dad, I need you to focus on breathing slowly," I said, taking his hand. "Emma is going to be okay. Derek will make sure she gets help." "This is my fault," Dad whispered. "I failed as a father. Both my children are criminals, and now Emma wants to die because of the shame." "No, Dad. Emma's choices are her own responsibility, not yours." But even as I said the words, I wondered if they were true. Had our family's dysfunction created the conditions for Emma and Jake's criminal behavior? Had my years of enabling actually made everything worse? My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. "Emma stable, pumped her stomach. Says she can't face the kids knowing she's a thief and a fraud. Please come if you can." Dr. Williams pulled me aside. "Ms. Mitchell, I need you to make a difficult decision. Your father requires immediate cardiac intervention. We need to insert a temporary pacemaker to regulate his heart rhythm. But the procedure requires family consent, and given the stress situation, I recommend limiting his exposure to ongoing family drama." "Are you saying I shouldn't tell him about Emma's suicide attempt?" "I'm saying that any additional shock could trigger cardiac arrest. Your father's heart is barely stable right now." I stood between two hospital rooms, both containing family members whose health had been destroyed by the consequences of years of lies and enabling. Emma was fighting for her emotional survival in one hospital, while Dad was fighting for his physical survival in another. Mom appeared beside me looking older and more fragile than I'd ever seen her. "Sweetheart, what do we do? How do we handle this?" "We take it one crisis at a time," I said, though I had no idea how to prioritize between my father's heart condition and my sister's suicide attempt. "And we pray that we all survive the truth we've been avoiding for so long." As medical alarms started beeping from Dad's room, I realized that the family's reckoning wasn't just about money or lies anymore. It was about survival itself. 2 days later, after Dad's heart had stabilized with medication and Emma had been released from psychiatric hold, I made the decision to organize a family intervention. I hired Dr. Patricia Valdez, a professional counselor who specialized in financial abuse and addiction within families. We met at a neutral location, a community center conference room, because none of our homes felt safe anymore. Emma arrived 20 minutes late, clearly drunk despite the early afternoon hour. Her hair was unwashed, and she wore the same clothes she'd had on during her hospital stay. "So this is what we're doing now," Emma slurred as she stumbled into her chair. "Group therapy for the family fuck-up." Dr. Valdez remained calm despite Emma's obvious intoxication. "Emma, I can see you're struggling. Are you under the influence of alcohol right now? Does it matter I'm a criminal anyway? Might as well be a drunk criminal." Derek, who had been sitting silently next to me, spoke up. "Emma, the kids are staying at my sister's house because they're afraid to be around you when you're like this." "My kids hate me." Emma laughed bitterly. "Madison told her school counselor that her mom is a thief. Do you know how that feels? Having your 13-year-old daughter ashamed to share your last name?" Jake arrived with Sarah, who looked like she hadn't slept in weeks. They sat as far from each other as possible, the tension between them palpable. "Before we begin," Dr. Valdez announced, "I need everyone to understand that this intervention is being recorded for legal purposes. Both Emma and Jake are facing federal charges, and anything said here could potentially be used in court proceedings." Emma leaned forward aggressively. "Legal purposes. What's next? Sherry, are you wearing a wire for your FBI friends?" "Emma, I'm trying to help you," I replied, fighting to keep my voice steady. "Help me." Emma's voice rose to a shout. "You destroyed my life. You turned my husband against me, you got my brother arrested, and now you want to play therapist." Dr. Valdez intervened. "Emma, can you help me understand what you think Sherry did wrong?" "She abandoned us. Family is supposed to support each other, not throw each other under the bus when things get tough." "When things get tough," Sarah spoke for the first time, her voice shaking with rage. "Emma, you and Jake stole money from our neighbors' retirement funds. You committed fraud. You lied to everyone who trusted you." Emma turned on Sarah with alcohol-fueled fury. "Don't you dare judge me. Your precious husband convinced 3 families to invest their life savings in a business that never existed." "I know that," Sarah screamed back. "My children will probably have to change schools because their father is a criminal, but at least Jake isn't blaming other people for his choices." Emma stood up unsteadily and pointed at me. "You want to know the truth about your perfect sister." She knew. She knew about my gambling, she knew about Jake's fake business, and she kept giving us money anyway because it made her feel important. "That's not true," I said quietly. "Really? Then why didn't you ever ask to see my business records? Why didn't you visit my supposed office? Why didn't you question why a successful consultant needed constant financial help?" Dr. Valdez leaned forward. "Emma, what you're describing sounds like you believe Sherry enabled your addiction and Jake's fraud. Is that accurate?" "Enabled it. She funded it." Emma's words were becoming more slurred. Saint Sherry, with her steady job and her savings account always ready to rescue her disaster siblings. It made her feel superior. Something snapped inside me. Years of suppressed anger and hurt suddenly boiled over. "You're right," I said, standing up to face Emma. "I did enable you. I enabled you because I was too afraid of losing my family to set boundaries. I enabled you because I thought love meant always saying yes. And I enabled you because I believed your lies when the truth was right in front of me." Emma swayed slightly, caught off guard by my admission. "But Emma," I continued, "the difference between us is that I'm taking responsibility for my part in this mess. You're standing here drunk, blaming everyone else for problems you created." Sherry, Dr. Valdez tried to interrupt. "No, I need to finish this." I walked closer to Emma. "I enabled your gambling addiction. I enabled Jake's fraud. But I didn't make you steal from me. I didn't make you forge my signature. I didn't make you destroy Derek's trust or traumatize your children." Emma's face contorted with rage. "You sanctimonious bitch! You think you're so much better than us!" Before anyone could react, Emma lunged at me, her fingernails raking across my cheek as she screamed obscenities. Derek and Jake jumped up to separate us while Dr. Valdez called for security. "I hate you," Emma shrieked as Derek pulled her away. "I hate you and your perfect life and your judgmental attitude. You ruined everything." Madison chose that moment to walk into the conference room. Derek's sister had brought her to collect some belongings, but instead she witnessed her mother in a drunken rage, scratching her aunt's face while screaming about hatred and blame. "Mom, Madison's voice was small and broken. Emma turned toward her daughter, and for a moment, her fury transformed into shame. But the alcohol and emotional volatility took over again. "Madison, don't look at me like that. Don't look at me like I'm some kind of monster." "But you are a monster," Madison said quietly, tears streaming down her face. "You're drunk again, you're violent, and you're blaming Aunt Sherry for problems you caused." Emma collapsed back into her chair, sobbing uncontrollably. Madison pulled out her phone and began recording. "Madison, what are you doing?" Derek asked. "Documenting this for the custody hearing," Madison replied with startling maturity. "Dad, I want to live with you permanently. I don't want Mom to have any custody rights until she proves she's not dangerous." As security guards entered the room and Dr. Valdez began making notes about the incident, I realized that Emma's intervention had become something else, entirely a final, devastating demonstration that she was nowhere near ready to take responsibility for her actions. The recording Madison was making would likely end Emma's parental rights and seal her fate in the federal criminal case. In her drunken rage, Emma had destroyed the last remaining pieces of her old life. The intervention incident triggered a cascade of legal consequences that none of us had anticipated. Madison's recording of Emma's drunken attack went viral after she posted it on social media with the caption, "This is what addiction and denial look like. My mom needs help, but first she needs consequences." Within 48 hours, the video had been viewed over 2 million times and picked up by local news stations. Emma's face was plastered across evening news broadcasts as an example of how financial crimes destroy families. Derek called me the morning after the video exploded online. "Sherry, I'm at the courthouse filing an emergency petition for full custody. Emma's lawyer is advising her to check into residential treatment immediately, but it might be too late." "What do you mean, too late?" "The prosecutor in the federal case called this morning. They're using Madison's video as evidence of Emma's instability and potential danger to the community. They're opposing bail and pushing for immediate sentencing." I felt a chill of guilt. Had my confrontation with Emma made her legal situation worse? "Derek, I never intended for things to go this far." "Sherry, Emma made her choices. The video just documented what was already true. She's dangerous when she's drinking, and she's nowhere near accepting responsibility for her crimes." Agent Chen called later that day to inform me that Emma's public breakdown had accelerated the federal investigation. "Ms. Mitchell, the prosecutor, wants to move quickly on both cases now. Your sister's behavior has convinced them that delayed prosecution would be a public safety risk." "What about Jake?" "Your brother has been more cooperative. He's providing information about other potential victims and helping us understand how the investment fraud operated. His willingness to cooperate may result in a lighter sentence." "How much lighter?" "Instead of 20 years, he might serve 5 to 7 with good behavior. But Emma..." Agent Chen paused. "Emma's charges have multiplied. Identity theft, credit card fraud, financial exploitation of a family member, and now the prosecutor is considering domestic violence charges based on her attack on you." I touched the scratch marks on my cheek, which had become infected and required antibiotic treatment. "I don't want to press domestic violence charges." "Ms. Mitchell, with respect, that decision may not be entirely yours. Madison's video shows a clear assault, and the federal prosecutor is building a case that Emma represents an escalating danger. They're arguing for enhanced sentencing." That evening, Sarah called with devastating news about their financial situation. "Sherry, the forensic accountant, finished reviewing our books. It's worse than we thought." "How much worse?" "Jake didn't just defraud the 3 neighbor families. He took money from his college alumni association, his former employer's pension fund, and even borrowed against the kids' savings bonds. The total is over $120,000. I sank onto my couch, overwhelmed by the scope of Jake's crimes. "Sarah, where are you going to live? How are you going to survive?" "I'm filing for bankruptcy and moving back in with my parents. The kids' college funds are gone. Our house is going into foreclosure, and Jake's legal defense costs are going to bankrupt whatever's left." "What about the kids? How are they handling this?" Sarah's voice broke. Tyler keeps asking when Daddy is coming home. He's 7 years old and he doesn't understand why Daddy can't live with us anymore. And Emma's kids. Madison is in therapy and she refuses to see Emma at all. Tyler, Emma's son, not mine, is acting out at school and getting in fights. The ripple effects of Emma and Jake's crimes were destroying multiple generations. Children were losing their parents, their homes, their financial security, and their trust in adults. My phone buzzed with a text from Mom. Dad back in hospital. Heart palpitations. Can you come? I drove to the hospital for what felt like the 100th time in 2 weeks. Dad was in the cardiac unit again this time with an irregular heartbeat that wouldn't stabilize. Dr. Williams pulled me aside. Ms. Mitchell, your father's condition has deteriorated significantly. The stress is literally destroying his heart muscle. We need to consider more aggressive interventions. What kind of interventions? A permanent pacemaker and possibly medication to manage anxiety. But I have to tell you honestly, if the stress level doesn't decrease dramatically, your father may not survive another major shock. Mom was sitting beside Dad's bed, holding his hand and looking utterly defeated. "Sweetheart," she said when she saw me, "the church board met last night." "About what?" "About my theft from the charity fund." Mom's voice was barely a whisper. "They're pressing charges, too." I stared at her in disbelief. "Mom, what exactly did you steal?" $12,000 over 8 months. I was planning to replace it with money you were giving us, but when that stopped..." She began crying. "I took cash donations meant for homeless families and used them to pay our bills." Dad's monitors started beeping erratically as his stress levels spiked. "Catherine, not now," he whispered weakly. "Mr. Mitchell needs rest," Dr. Williams said firmly. "Family discussions about legal matters need to happen elsewhere." As I left the hospital, I realized that every member of my immediate family was now facing criminal charges. Emma and Jake were heading to federal prison. Mom would probably face jail time for embezzlement, and Dad might not survive the stress of watching his family destroy itself. The useless daughter who had once been mocked at family dinners was now the only one with a clean, legal, record-stable employment and a functional life. But as I drove home alone to my empty apartment, the irony felt hollow and meaningless. I had wanted respect and appreciation from my family. Instead, I had accidentally triggered a criminal investigation that might send them all to prison. A month after the intervention disaster, I received a call that changed everything. Madison, my teenage niece, was on the line, her voice shaky but determined. "Aunt Sherry, I need to tell you something important. Can we meet somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a small coffee shop downtown away from both families and media attention. When Madison arrived, she looked older than her 13 years, carrying a heavy backpack and wearing an expression of serious purpose. "I've been documenting everything," she said without preamble, pulling out a thick folder from her backpack. "Mom and Uncle Jake's lies the money problems, how they treated you. I started recording conversations 6 months ago when I realized something was wrong." "Madison, why were you doing that?" "Because I'm not stupid, Aunt Sherry. I could see that Mom was never actually working, that she was always stressed about money, and that you were the one keeping our family together." Madison's voice carried a maturity that broke my heart. I knew someday the truth would come out, and I wanted proof. She opened the folder and showed me dozens of photos, audio recordings transcribed on notebook paper, and even video clips she'd secretly taken. The evidence was comprehensive and damning. "Look at this," Madison said, pointing to a transcribed conversation. "This is Mom on the phone with Uncle Jake 3 months ago. She's telling him how to lie to you about the business expenses so you'd give him more money." I read the transcript feeling sick as I saw the calculated nature of their deception. Emma and Jake had been coordinating their lies, coaching each other on how to manipulate me more effectively. And this. Madison continued showing me a photo of bank statements. "I found these in Mom's dresser. She's been keeping track of how much money she's taken from your credit cards. She knew exactly how much she was stealing." The evidence showed that Emma's crimes weren't impulsive mistakes. Driven by addiction, they were carefully planned theft, designed to fund her gambling while maintaining her lies to Derek. Madison, why are you showing me this now? Because the FBI agent, Agent Chen, came to talk to me yesterday. She said Mom might try to plea bargain by claiming she was mentally unstable and not responsible for her actions. But I have proof that she knew exactly what she was doing. Madison pulled out her phone and played an audio recording. Emma's voice was clear and sober as she discussed with Jake how to forge my signature on checks. She practiced copying your signature for weeks, Madison said quietly. I watched her do it. This wasn't some desperate mistake, Aunt Sherry. She planned to steal from you. I felt overwhelmed by Madison's revelations, but also proud of her courage. Honey, you realize this evidence will probably ensure your mother goes to prison for a long time. I know. Madison's eyes filled with tears, but her voice remained steady. But what she did to you was wrong, and what she did to our family was wrong. Someone has to stand up for the truth. Have you told your father about this evidence? Dad's the one who suggested I talk to you. He said you deserve to know the full extent of what Mom did. Madison wiped her eyes. Aunt Sherry, I want to ask you something. Can I come live with you? The question caught me completely off guard. Madison, your father loves you. Why wouldn't you want to live with him? Because Dad's going to spend the next few years dealing with lawyers and trying to rebuild his life. I don't want to be a burden. She paused, choosing her words carefully. And because you're the only adult in this family who's been honest and reliable, I feel safe with you. Before I could respond, my phone rang. Derek's name appeared on the screen. Sherry, thank God. Madison said she was meeting with you. Is she okay? She's fine, Derek. She's been showing me some evidence she collected. The FBI wants to interview her officially. Agent Chen thinks Madison's documentation could be crucial for the prosecution. Derek's voice was strained. Sherry, I need to ask you something difficult. Would you be willing to be Madison's legal guardian if something happens to me? What do you mean if something happens to you? The stress of this situation, the financial ruin, the custody battles, I'm barely holding it together. Madison needs stability, and you're the only person in her life who can provide that. I looked at Madison, who was watching my face intently while trying to pretend she wasn't listening to the conversation. Derek, let me call you back in a few minutes. I hung up and turned to Madison. Honey, living with me would mean changing schools, leaving your friends, and dealing with a very different lifestyle. I don't have a big house or expensive things. I don't care about that stuff. Madison's voice was firm. I care about being with someone who tells the truth and treats people with respect. I've watched you handle this whole crisis with dignity, while everyone else fell apart. What about your brother, Tyler? How would you feel about being separated from him? Madison's face crumpled slightly. Tyler is only 10. Dad can take care of him better than I can. But Aunt Sherry, I need to be somewhere I can heal from all this. I need to be with someone who won't lie to me or steal from people or blame others for their mistakes. Her words hit me like a physical blow. This teenager had articulated something profound about our family's dysfunction. The children needed truth and stability more than they needed proximity to their parents. Madison, if you come live with me, there will be rules. No social media about the family situation. Therapy sessions to help you process everything that's happened, and absolute honesty between us even when it's difficult. I agree to all of that. Madison smiled for the first time since she'd arrived. Aunt Sherry, can I ask you something else? Of course. When all this is over, when Mom and Uncle Jake are in prison and the trials are finished, do you think our family can ever be normal again? I considered her question carefully. I think our family can become something better than normal Madison. I think we can become honest. As we sat in that coffee shop surrounded by the evidence of our family's crimes and planning for an uncertain future, I realized that Madison's decision to document the truth and seek stability had created an unexpected alliance. The teenager had become the moral center of our family, and her courage was showing me a path forward. For the first time since this crisis began, I felt hopeful about something not about fixing the past, but about building something better from the wreckage. 6 weeks later, The full financial investigation revealed consequences none of us had imagined. IRS agents arrived at my apartment on a Tuesday morning with boxes of documents and questions about every transaction I'd made in the past 3 years. Agent Patricia Reynolds explained the scope of the investigation while spreading financial records across my dining table. Ms. Mitchell, your family's financial crimes have triggered a comprehensive audit of all related parties. Unfortunately, that includes you. But I was the victim of their crimes. We understand that, but you were also unknowingly facilitating tax evasion and money laundering. Agent Reynolds pointed to a complex chart showing money flows between various accounts. Your financial support enabled your siblings to underreport income-hide assets from creditors and avoid paying taxes on fraudulent gains. The IRS had discovered that Emma and Jake had been using my legitimate financial support to create false paper trails that made their criminal activities appear legal. My regular transfers to Emma had been documented as business income on her tax returns, while my payments to Jake had been reported as consulting fees to make his non-existent company look profitable. What does this mean for me? I asked, feeling overwhelmed by the complexity of the financial web my family had created. You're not criminally liable, but you may face civil penalties for unknowingly participating in tax fraud. We're also requiring you to provide complete documentation of every payment you made, including the source of the funds and your understanding of their intended use. Agent Reynolds handed me a thick packet of forms. Additionally, the IRS is seizing assets from your siblings to satisfy tax liabilities and restitution orders. Emma's house is being auctioned next month, and Jake's business assets, what few legitimate ones exist, are being liquidated. What about my parents? They're not involved in the fraud. Actually, they are. Agent Reynolds pulled out another set of documents. Your mother's theft from the church charity fund created additional tax complications. She'll owe taxes on the stolen money as unreported income plus penalties and interest. The financial devastation was staggering. Emma owed over $40,000 in taxes on gambling winnings she'd never reported, plus penalties that doubled the amount. Jake faced a tax bill of $63,000 for the investor money he'd stolen, which the IRS classified as unreported business income. Mom's situation was equally dire. The $12,000 she'd stolen from the church was considered taxable income, and her failure to report it triggered penalties that brought her total liability to $18,000. None of them can pay these amounts, I said quietly. Which is why the IRS is pursuing asset forfeiture. Emma and Derek's house will be sold with proceeds split between the mortgage company tax obligations and restitution to victims. Jake and Sarah's house is already in foreclosure, so those proceeds will go entirely to the IRS and Victim Compensation Fund. Agent Reynolds paused, studying my face. Ms. Mitchell, there's something else you need to know. The federal prosecutor is offering your siblings plea deals that would require them to make full restitution to all victims, including you. How much restitution? For Emma, $87,000 covering the credit card fraud, forged checks, and cash advances. For Jake, $123,000 covering the investor fraud and misappropriated funds. I laughed bitterly. They don't have that kind of money. They'll never be able to pay those amounts. Which brings us to an unusual situation. Agent Reynolds leaned forward. The prosecutor is prepared to reduce their sentences significantly if a family member can guarantee partial restitution payments. The implication hit me like a punch to the stomach. You're asking me to pay restitution for their crimes. We're informing you that such an arrangement is possible. It would allow your siblings to avoid maximum prison sentences while ensuring victims receive at least partial compensation. How much would I need to pay? $50,000 up front plus agreement to cover ongoing tax liabilities and penalties. Agent Reynolds handed me another document. In exchange, Emma would serve 18 months instead of 5 years, and Jake would serve 2 years instead of 7. I stared at the papers, feeling the familiar weight of family obligation pressing down on me. Even facing federal prosecution, even after everything they'd done, my siblings were still finding ways to make their problems my responsibility. What happens if I refuse? Emma and Jake serve their full sentences. The victims receive minimal restitution from asset forfeitures. Your parents face their tax liabilities without family assistance. Agent Reynolds' voice was matter of fact. And you maintain clear boundaries between yourself and your family's criminal behavior. That evening, I called Madison to discuss the situation. She was living with me temporarily while Derek handled the legal complications of Emma's case. They want you to pay for Mom and Uncle Jake's crimes. Madison's voice was incredulous. It's more complicated than that. The money would go to their victims, not to them, and it would keep them from spending years in federal prison. Madison was quiet for a long moment. Aunt Sherry, can I ask you something? If you pay this money, what message does that send to Mom and Uncle Jake? Her question crystallized the moral dilemma I was facing. Paying the restitution would help the victims and reduce my siblings' sentences, but it would also reinforce the pattern of me rescuing them from consequences they'd created. Madison, what do you think I should do? I think you should ask the victims what they want, she said simply. This isn't just about our family anymore. Other people got hurt by Mom and Uncle Jake's crimes. Maybe they should have a say in what happens next. Her wisdom constantly amazed me. At 13, Madison had developed a moral clarity that the adults in our family had lost years ago. The next morning, I made a decision that would reshape everything. Instead of responding to the prosecutor's offer immediately, I contacted the 3 families Jake had defrauded and asked to meet with them personally. It was time to face the human cost of my family's crimes and let the victims guide my decision about restitution. 8 months later, something unexpected began to happen. Emma called me from the federal minimum security facility, where she was serving her reduced sentence, and for the first time in years, she sounded completely sober and genuinely remorseful. Sherry, I know I don't deserve your time or attention, but I need you to know something. Emma's voice was clear and steady over the phone. I've been in Gamblers Anonymous for 6 months now, and I'm working through the 12 steps. Step 9 requires me to make amends to people I've harmed. Emma, if you're calling to ask for something, I'm not. I'm calling to take full responsibility for what I did to you. Emma's voice cracked slightly. I stole from you. I lied to you. I manipulated your love for our family to fund my addiction. And then I blamed you when my crimes were exposed. I sat down unprepared for this conversation. Emma, what's different now? Prison is different. There's no alcohol, no access to gambling, no way to avoid the reality of what I did. Emma paused. Sherry, I destroyed my children's trust, my marriage, my relationship with you, and our parents' health. I did that. Not addiction, not mental illness, not family dysfunction, me. This level of accountability was completely new from Emma. What about Jake? Have you talked to him? Jake's in a different facility, but we write letters. He's going through the same process. I am taking responsibility for his choices instead of blaming circumstances. Emma's voice became stronger. Sherry, I need to tell you something about the restitution money you paid. I had ultimately decided to pay $50,000 toward victim restitution after meeting with the defrauded families. Their stories of lost retirement savings and financial devastation had convinced me that helping them was more important than maintaining perfect boundaries with my siblings. What about it? I'm going to pay you back, every dollar. Emma's determination surprised me. I've been working in the prison's computer training program, and I'm learning skills I can use when I get out. I've also been developing a real business plan for a legitimate consulting company. Emma, you don't need to... Yes, I do. Part of making amends is making restitution, not just apologizing. Emma's voice was firm. I've calculated that if I get a job paying $30,000 when I'm released and live extremely modestly, I can pay you back within 5 years. What about Derek and the kids? Derek has agreed to supervised visitation after I complete outpatient addiction treatment. Emma's voice softened when she mentioned her children. Madison has been writing to me. Did you know she's doing amazing in school since she's been living with you? I smiled, thinking of Madison's straight A report card that was hanging on my refrigerator. She's an incredible kid. She is, and that's despite having me as a mother, not because of it. Emma paused. Sherry Madison told me in her last letter that you never once said anything negative about me to her. Even after everything I did, you protected my relationship with my daughter. I thought that was the right thing to do. It was the right thing to do, but it was more than I deserved. Emma's voice was thick with emotion. You've given Madison stability, honesty, and a healthy environment while I worked on getting better. You saved my daughter when I couldn't. Before I could respond, Emma continued. There's something else. The computer skills I'm learning in here. They're real. I'm getting certified in database management and basic programming. When I get out, I want to start a legitimate business, helping small companies organize their financial records. That sounds like a solid plan. It is because it's based on real skills and realistic expectations instead of fantasies about quick money. Emma laughed slightly. Imagine that Emma Patterson with a realistic business plan. After the call ended, I sat thinking about the changes I was hearing in Emma's voice and attitude. The accountability, the concrete plans, the genuine remorse, it all seemed authentic in a way that Emma's previous promises had never been. My phone rang again this time with a call from Jake. He was calling from his facility's common room during designated family calling hours. Sherry, I heard you talk to Emma today. I hope it went well. It did. She sounds different. Prison changes you, Jake said quietly. Not in the dramatic way they show in movies, but in smaller ways. You have time to think about your choices without any distractions or ways to avoid reality. Jake's voice sounded different too, more mature, more thoughtful. Sherry, I need to tell you something about the investment fraud. I've been working with a victims advocacy group here, helping them understand how financial schemes work so they can educate other people. That's good, Jake. It's more than good, it's healing. For the first time in my life, I'm using my mistakes to help other people instead of just helping myself. Jake's voice carried genuine pride. The State Attorney General's office has asked me to speak at seminars about investment fraud when I'm released. That's a real opportunity. It is, and it's based on something meaningful instead of just making money. Jake paused. Sherry, I know I can't undo the damage I caused, but I can spend the rest of my life making sure other families don't go through what ours did. As I hung up the phone, I realized that both Emma and Jake were discovering something that had eluded them their entire adult lives, the satisfaction that comes from honest work and genuine contribution rather than shortcuts and schemes. For the first time since this crisis began, I felt genuine hope that my siblings might emerge from prison as better people rather than just more careful criminals. 18 months after Emma entered federal custody, she was released to a halfway house in our hometown. She called me on her first day of freedom, asking if we could meet at the same coffee shop where Madison and I had first planned their new living arrangements. When Emma walked in, I barely recognized her. She had gained healthy weight, her skin looked clear and vibrant, and she wore simple, clean clothes that suggested someone comfortable with modesty. Most dramatically, she carried herself with a quiet confidence I had never seen before. "Thank you for meeting me," Emma said, sitting down across from me. "I know you didn't have to. How are you adjusting? It's strange being out, but good strange." Emma smiled genuinely. "I start work on Monday at Henderson Accounting Services. It's data entry and basic bookkeeping, $32,000 a year to start." "That's wonderful, Emma." "It's honest work, which feels better than I expected." Emma pulled out a folder from her purse. "Sherry, I have something for you." Inside the folder was a detailed business plan for a company called Second Chance Financial Services, a consultancy designed to help people recovering from bankruptcy addiction or financial fraud rebuild their credit and develop healthy money management skills. I spent 6 months developing this with help from the business mentors at the halfway house, Emma explained. It's based on my real experience with financial recovery, and it serves a population that needs genuine help. The business plan was thorough and realistic with conservative financial projections and a clear mission statement focused on service rather than profit maximization. Emma, this looks legitimate and thoughtful. It is because it's built on truth instead of fantasy. Emma leaned forward. But I'm not starting it yet. I want to work for someone else for at least 2 years, prove I can maintain steady employment and save money before I risk entrepreneurship again. This level of patience and planning was completely new for Emma. What changed your perspective so dramatically? Failure. Emma answered without hesitation. Complete, total, undeniable failure. I lost everything: my marriage, my children's respect, my home, my freedom. But losing everything also freed me from the pressure to maintain an image that was never real. Emma pulled out another document, a promissory note promising to repay me $50 monthly until her debt was satisfied. It's not much, but it's what I can afford while still supporting myself and paying court-ordered restitution to other victims. Emma's voice was matter of fact. At $50 monthly, it will take me 83 years to pay you back completely. I couldn't help but laugh. Emma, I'll be 115 years old. Then I'll leave the debt to Madison in my will, Emma replied seriously. The point isn't the timeline, it's the commitment to making restitution instead of expecting forgiveness without accountability. Before I could respond, Derek walked into the coffee shop with Madison and Tyler. The reunion was Emma's first supervised visit with her children since her arrest. Madison, now 14 and even more mature, approached her mother cautiously. "Hi, Mom." Emma stood up slowly, tears filling her eyes. "Madison, you look so grown up. How's school?" "Good. I'm on the honor roll and I'm student council vice president." Madison's voice was polite but reserved. Tyler, who was 11 and hadn't seen his mother in over a year, hung back behind Derek, clearly uncertain about his emotions. "Tyler, honey, how are you?" Emma knelt down to his level, careful not to overwhelm him. "Are you going to live with us again?" Tyler asked directly. Emma looked at Derek before answering. "No, sweetheart. Mommy hurt our family with her mistakes, and she needs to prove she's better before she can be part of our daily lives again." Derek watched this exchange carefully. Emma's been attending Gamblers Anonymous meetings and individual therapy for 8 months, he explained to the children. She's also working with a financial counselor to learn healthy money management. Madison studied her mother's face. "Mom, Aunt Sherry says you're working at a real job now." "I am. I enter financial data into computer systems for small businesses." Emma's voice carried genuine pride. "It's not glamorous, but it's honest work that helps people." "Do you miss gambling?" Tyler asked with the directness that children possess. Emma considered the question seriously. "Yes, sometimes I do, but I've learned that missing something and needing something are different. I don't need to gamble anymore because I have things in my life that are more important, like earning back your trust." Derek had been watching this conversation with careful attention. "Emma, the kids and I have been discussing whether we're ready to try family counseling together." Emma's face lit up with hope. "We're willing to try," Derek said carefully, "but with clear boundaries and realistic expectations. The goal isn't to reunite our family, it's to create a healthy relationship between you and the children." Madison spoke up. "Mom, I need to tell you something. I'm proud of you for getting help and taking responsibility, but I'm also angry about the years of lies and the stress you put our family through." "You have every right to be angry," Emma replied without defensiveness, "and you have the right to take as much time as you need to decide whether you want a relationship with me." Tyler looked confused. "Madison, are we allowed to love Mom even though she did bad things?" Madison knelt down to her brother's level. "We can love Mom and still protect ourselves from being hurt again. Those aren't opposite things." As I watched this careful, honest conversation between Emma and her children, I realized that something profound had shifted. The family wasn't healing through denial or quick forgiveness. They were healing through truth, accountability, and realistic expectations. Emma had finally become the kind of person who deserved her children's love, but only after accepting that she might not get it back. 2 years after Emma's release, our family gathered for a dinner that looked nothing like our old monthly gatherings. Instead of meeting at our parents' house with its history of denial and enabling, we met at Madison's high school graduation party in the community center, where we'd once held our disastrous intervention. Emma arrived carrying a simple bouquet of flowers and a card she'd made herself. She wore a modest blue dress she'd bought at a thrift store and a smile that reached her eyes in a way I hadn't seen since we were children. "Congratulations, sweetheart," Emma said to Madison, offering the flowers. "I'm so proud of you." Madison, now 16 and preparing for her senior year, accepted the flowers graciously. "Thanks, Mom. How's the new job going?" Emma's face brightened. "Really well. I got promoted to senior bookkeeper and they're paying for me to take accounting classes at the community college." She paused, looking around the room. "And I have something to announce to everyone." Jake arrived with Sarah and their children. The reconciliation between Jake and Sarah had been even more gradual than Emma's relationship with Derek, but 18 months of couples therapy and Jake's genuine transformation had slowly rebuilt their marriage. "Sarah, how are the kids adjusting to having Jake home?" I asked. "Better than I expected," Sarah replied honestly. "Jake's work with the Attorney General's office has given him purpose, and the kids are proud that their dad helps protect other families from fraud." Jake looked healthier than I'd ever seen him, lean, focused, and carrying himself with quiet dignity. "I spoke at 3 high schools this month about investment scams," he announced. The response was incredible. These kids are asking smart questions about financial responsibility that I never learned until I was facing federal charges. Our parents arrived together, walking slowly but looking more peaceful than they had in years. Dad's heart condition had stabilized once the family crisis resolved, and Mom had completed her community service for the church theft while attending financial literacy classes. "How are you feeling, Dad?" Emma asked, genuinely concerned. "Stronger every day," Dad replied, squeezing Emma's hand. "It's amazing how much better I feel now that our family is based on truth instead of lies." Mom had prepared a simple meal, nothing like the elaborate dinners she used to stage, to impress us with money she couldn't afford to spend. "I wanted to say something before we eat," Mom announced. "I owe all of you an apology for my role in enabling the financial dysfunction in our family. I was so afraid of conflict that I chose denial over healthy boundaries." Mom looked around the table. "But I'm proud of who we've all become through facing the truth." Emma raised her hand slightly. "I have that announcement I mentioned." She took a deep breath. "Next month, I'm opening Second Chance Financial Services. I have 3 clients already, all people recovering from bankruptcy or gambling addiction." Derek smiled genuinely. "Emma, that's wonderful. How did you get your first clients?" "Through the Halfway House and Gamblers Anonymous. People who know my story and trust that I understand their challenges." Emma's voice carried quiet confidence. "I'm not expecting to get rich, but I'm expecting to help people while supporting myself honestly." Madison clapped softly. "Mom, I'm really proud of you." Jake leaned forward. "Emma, if you need any help with business registration or legal paperwork, I can connect you with someone at the Attorney General's office who helps recovering offenders start legitimate businesses." "Thank you, Jake. That would be helpful." Emma turned to me. "Sherry, I also want to announce that I've made my final payment to the Victims' Compensation Fund. All of Jake's and my victims have been repaid in full." This was news to me. "How did you manage that?" "I've been working 2 jobs for the past year, bookkeeping during the day and cleaning offices at night. Every extra dollar went to restitution." Emma's voice was matter-of-fact. It was important to me that people were made whole before I focused on my own business dreams. Jake nodded agreement. "Sarah and I made our final restitution payment last month too. It took everything we had, but our victims deserve to be repaid." As we sat around that simple table eating Mom's modest meal and celebrating Madison's achievements, I realized how dramatically our family dynamics had changed. Instead of competing for attention or resources, we were supporting each other's growth. Instead of hiding problems, we were openly discussing challenges and solutions. "I have something to share too," I announced. "I've been accepted into a master's program in family financial counseling. I want to help other families avoid the mistakes we made." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Sherry, that's perfect. You have so much wisdom to offer other people." The irony is that I learned most of that wisdom by enabling all of you for years, I replied with a smile. Now I can help other people set healthy boundaries before their families self-destruct. Madison, who had been quietly listening to all these announcements, raised her water glass. "I want to make a toast," she said with the poise of someone much older than 16. "To our family," Madison continued, "for choosing truth over comfort, accountability over blame, and healing over hiding. We're not perfect, but we're honest, and that makes all the difference." As we clinked our glasses together, water, coffee, and soda instead of the wine our old family dinners featured, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years, genuine pride in my family. We had lost almost everything: money, homes, marriages, legal records, social standing, but we had gained something more valuable: the ability to love each other honestly. 5 years after that devastating family dinner, when Emma called me useless, I stood in the courthouse watching my sister receive a community service award from the state attorney general. Emma's financial counseling work had helped over 200 families recover from bankruptcy and addiction-related financial crises. Emma Patterson's transformation from perpetrator to advocate represents the best of our criminal justice system, Attorney General Williams announced to the assembled crowd. Her work has prevented countless families from experiencing the pain that financial fraud inflicts on victims. Emma accepted the award with characteristic humility, then stepped to the microphone to address the audience of social workers, legal advocates, and recovering addicts. 5 years ago, I was a criminal. Emma began simply. I stole money from my sister, lied to my husband, and destroyed my children's sense of security because I couldn't face the truth about my gambling addiction and financial incompetence. The audience listened intently as Emma continued. The person who saved my family wasn't a therapist, a lawyer, or a judge. It was my sister Sherry, who loved me enough to stop enabling my destructive behavior, even when it meant watching me face devastating consequences. I felt tears building as Emma's eyes found mine in the audience. Recovery didn't begin when I entered prison or started gambling addiction treatment, Emma said. Recovery began the night my sister asked me one simple question. How does it feel knowing this useless one won't be paying your bills anymore? That question forced me to confront the reality that I had been exploiting the person who loved me most. Jake, who was sitting beside me with Sarah and their children, reached over and squeezed my hand. His work with the Attorney General's office had led to legislation strengthening penalties for investment fraud, and he had testified before Congress about protecting vulnerable populations from financial scams. The hardest part of recovery, Emma continued, wasn't admitting I had an addiction. It was accepting that my addiction had turned me into someone who hurt the people I claimed to love. My sister didn't abandon me. She forced me to save myself. After the ceremony, our extended family gathered at my apartment for a celebration dinner. Madison, now a college sophomore studying social work, had driven down from school for the event. Tyler and Emma's younger children played video games, while the adults talked about Emma's expanding business and Jake's latest legislative advocacy work. Derek, who had remarried Emma in a small ceremony the previous year, pulled me aside during dinner. "Sherry, I need you to know something. The woman I married last year is completely different from the woman I divorced 5 years ago." "How so?" "She's honest about her limitations, realistic about money, and committed to service instead of self-interest." Derek smiled. "But most importantly, she's grateful for what she has instead of resentful about what she's lost." Dad, now 78, but healthier than he'd been in years, tapped his water glass for attention. "I want to say something to my children," he announced. When this crisis started 5 years ago, I was ashamed of my family. Emma was a thief. Jake was a fraud Catherine had embezzled from charity, and I felt like we had failed as parents. Dad's voice was steady but emotional. But watching all of you take responsibility for your mistakes and rebuild your lives has made me prouder than any superficial success ever could. Mom nodded agreement. Sherry, you saved this family by refusing to participate in our dysfunction. You loved us enough to let us face the consequences of our choices. Madison stood up now, a confident young woman preparing for graduate school. Aunt Sherry, can I say something? Of course, sweetheart. You taught me that loving someone doesn't mean protecting them from reality. It means caring enough about their well-being to tell them the truth, even when it hurts. Madison's voice carried the wisdom of someone who had learned profound lessons at a young age. Because of your courage, I grew up in a family that values honesty over comfort, and that's a gift I'll carry for the rest of my life. As the evening wound down and family members began heading home to their modest but stable lives, Emma approached me with an envelope. Sherry, this is my final payment, Emma said, handing me a check for $50. After 5 years and 2 months, I've repaid the last dollar I stole from you. I looked at the check representing not just money, but Emma's commitment to accountability. Emma, what you've accomplished is worth far more than $50,000. Maybe, but paying you back wasn't just about the money. It was about proving to myself that I could follow through on a commitment even when it was difficult. Emma hugged me tightly. You gave me the greatest gift anyone has ever given me. What was that? You refused to enable me to stay broken. You loved me enough to let me hit bottom so I could learn to stand up. Emma pulled back and looked me in the eyes. That dinner 5 years ago when you called yourself useless was the night you became the hero of our family story. As I cleaned up after everyone left, I reflected on the journey that had brought us from dysfunction to healing. The family that had once mocked me for being useless now credited me with saving them. But the real truth was more complex than that simple narrative. I had enabled their destructive behavior for years before finally setting boundaries. My financial support had inadvertently funded Emma's gambling addiction and Jake's fraudulent schemes. My desire to be needed had prevented me from seeing the truth that was obvious to everyone else. But when I finally found the courage to stop rescuing them from consequences they had created, something unexpected happened. Instead of destroying our family relationships, boundaries had strengthened them. Instead of ending my connection with my siblings, accountability had deepened our bonds. The lesson I learned, and the one I now teach other families in my counseling practice, is that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for someone is to refuse to participate in their self-destruction. Enabling feels like love because it avoids immediate conflict, but it actually prevents people from developing the skills they need to solve their own problems. True love sometimes requires watching people we care about struggle with difficulties they have created for themselves. It means accepting that we cannot save other people from their choices, but we can save ourselves from being destroyed by those choices. That night, 5 years ago, when Emma sneered at me and called me useless, I discovered that the most powerful response to family dysfunction isn't anger or retaliation. It's simply refusing to participate. By stopping my financial support, I forced my family to confront reality instead of living in denial. The useless sister who had been mocked for her stable job and modest lifestyle turned out to be the family's foundation. But more importantly, the family that had been built on lies, exploitation, and denial was transformed into one built on honesty, mutual respect, and genuine love. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give our family is the gift of consequences. And sometimes the most useful thing we can do is refuse to be used. What do you think? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who were taking advantage of your generosity? How did you find the courage to stop enabling behavior that was hurting both you and them? Share your thoughts in the comments below your story. Might help someone else who's struggling with similar family dynamics. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and transformation. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe for more real-life stories about overcoming family challenges, and share it with someone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries with people you love. Remember, you can't save everyone, but you can save yourself, and sometimes that's exactly what your family needs. Until next time, take care of yourselves and each other.